Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do the next chapter, chapter 5 of the Occult Investigator, Real Cases from the Files of Ex-Investigations book by Bob Johnson. As always, I'll include the link below in case you wanted to read the book for free on your own. This chapter has to do with a fascinating case of Satanism and Satanists. In this case, having to be close by, very close by, it looks like, to the author himself. It's one thing to read about it, right? It's another thing when they're apparently your next door neighbors. Interesting stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and do part 1 of chapter 5 here, and then do part 2 in another video, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward. As always, I'd love to hear what your own thoughts are too. By the way, lots of people are liking this particular book. I see the analytics associated with it, and they're getting much better options than, let's say, some of the other videos right now. So definitely good stuff. So here goes. My old friend Aggie, a chain-smoking middle-aged third-generation Irish woman, has lived in Hell's Kitchen on the Upper West Side of Manhattan all of her life. She had seen Hell's Kitchen change from a predominantly Irish working-class section of New York City to a black and Hispanic neighborhood, and then gentrify into a new yuppie haven. Aggie's home was never what you would call tranquil. In her youth, she had to be wary of gang violence and street toughs, and the changes over the year brought new directions and different kinds of criminal activity. Despite it all, Aggie survived and was never really frightened about anything in her neighborhood. Her attitude was always that as long as she could walk and talk and had the Lord at her back, she was okay. But then she discovered that Satanists lived in her apartment building. Aggie was the superintendent of an 8-story walk-up tenement building located in the 50s on 11th Avenue. The neighborhood was experiencing quite a change in the late 1990s as apartments all over New York were becoming more and more expensive. It was the typical Manhattan scenario. The best neighborhoods became pricey, young people can't afford them, so the boundaries expand into poorer and underdeveloped areas. This was happening quickly in Hell's Kitchen, which is now called Clinton. I knew Aggie since I was a child. She and my Aunt Carol were the best of friends, and since Carol passed away, Aggie had kept in touch with me. She and my aunt were devout Roman Catholics, and they always feared that my interest in the occult was putting my life and immortal soul in danger. They needed regular assurance that I was fine and wasn't becoming possessed or going over to the other side. In fact, Aunt Carol would never actually pronounce the word devil. Whenever she referred to him, she would say divil with an I instead of an E, explaining that she wouldn't give him the benefit of calling him by his proper name. Her bit of Irish wisdom explained it this way. Well, how do you call someone when you want them? You say their name. If you never say their name, they'll never answer you. So you don't want the dark one answering you now, do you? So when Aggie called me at home one Saturday morning to see how I was doing, I wasn't surprised to hear from her, but I did notice a faint sound of concern in her voice. I asked if anything was troubling her. She told me that I might have thought she was going loony in her old age, but she recently heard that the couple in apartment 7S was a bit strange. I asked Aggie what she meant by strange, and after a few minutes of hemming and hawing, she spit it out. Oh, Bobby, those people are devil worshippers. They pray to the Dark One, to Satan himself, she said hysterically. After a few minutes of trying to calm her down, I figured out what she was trying to tell me. Apparently, new tenants in the building who rented the apartment next to the longtime tenants in apartment 7S were asking other people in the building if they knew about the couple next door to them. They said they were concerned because they heard noises and music playing. At times, they heard a gong being struck, and there were all sorts of weird people, many dressed in black, coming in and out of the apartment. I told Aggie that this could be nothing more than crazy rumors, particularly because the people in 7S had lived there for more years than Aggie herself, and that she should dismiss it as nonsense. At first, Aggie agreed to let it go and not to worry, but as we were ending our conversation, she said that she might ask her parish priest to make a visit on 7S just to be on the safe side. Considering the litigious society we now live in, I told Aggie that wasn't a good idea and she should really mind her own business. But Bobby, I can't mind my own business. If these people are black-hearted devil worshippers, they will infect the whole building. Who knows what blasphemies they've been committing up there? I'm the super of the building. The good Lord will never forgive me if I just close my eyes to evil. I never done it in the past, and I am about to do it now, my boy. It's hard to argue with a feisty old Irish dame, so I appeased her by asking to hold off on calling the parish priest and let me see what I could do. Aggie thanked me profusely and reminded me that Aunt Carol was smiling in heaven at that very moment. It was comforting to picture my aunt happy and at peace. So the Irish charm worked, and my next case for X investigations began. I was about to discover if there was truly diabolical events going on in apartment 7S in the middle of Manhattan, but my real concern was to keep Aggie safe, both physically and mentally. The first thing I needed to do was brush up on real satanic ritual, not the mumbo-jumbo that we're bombarded with in newspapers and TV. After spending many years studying the occult, the one thing I am certain about is the most common knowledge about almost any discipline, sect, lodge, or religious item is usually wrong. Occult topics make for juicy sensationalist headlines and sound bites, and they're exploited at the expense of people who take their beliefs seriously. It's easy to take a shot at anything strange or out of the ordinary because the people who practice esoteric disciplines don't fight back, often out of fear of being labeled kooks or weirdos. Interestingly enough, the single most illuminating fact I discovered about modern Satanism is that there has never been one case of ritual sacrifice, abduction, mutilation, or death linked to any satanic organization or individual, despite the hysterical claims of the media and religious fundamentalists. And this comes straight from the FBI and other government law enforcement agencies. Oh yes, there are tons of historical data about heinous crimes perpetrated by those who claim to be Satanists, but there is no hard evidence for any of it. Of course, I discovered voluminous tomes describing arcane rituals and sell your soul pacts with the devil that range from silly to downright hair-raising, and there are dozens of documented cases of demonic possession and the obligatory exorcism to go along with them. But I never experienced any real possession in any case I've conducted, and I always find it suspect that the exorcism craze started shortly after William Peter Blatty's book and the movie The Exorcist that was published in the 70s. So I really needed to know what was disturbing Aggie so much in order to conduct a legitimate investigation. If she had Satanists in her building and they were indeed conjuring demons or conducting some real proof of evil, I wanted that proof. I met with Aggie later that week and asked her to explain just what her problem was with the people in 7S besides the odd couple coming in and out. I took a hard line with her, despite the fact that I cared about Aggie as much as I did my own aunt. I knew Aggie was prone to gossip and exaggeration, so specifics were vital to this case. After a few sips of tea, with a special added ingredient of cheer to loosen the tongue, Aggie began explaining the circumstances in 7S. It first started with the smells, Bobby. You know how I clean the halls almost every day, when my back at least allows me to, and there was this one day that I smelled quite a peculiar odor coming from the apartment. It was a smell I never noticed before, some kind of burning incense, but not the pretty kind that smells like violets or strawberry. No, this was a smell like a burning cork or an old tree being burned. And it had a sweet odor about it too, a mix of strange smells that remind me of them Indian restaurants but stronger. So strong it was burning my eyes and nose, and I'm used to the ammonia, so it takes a lot to burn my senses, Aggie said. I listened but said to her that people burn incense all the time and it's nothing to be alarmed about. It didn't seem strange to me at all until Aggie mentioned that the incense was now burning 24 hours a day and permeating the entire floor for days at a time. She told me that the burning would begin in the evening and then people would arrive, most of them dressed in black and some looking like they didn't even belong in this era. I asked if they were wearing costumes, but Aggie said no. They were wearing period clothing, mostly from the 40s and 50s. Men in hats, women with nylon stockings and polka dot dresses, even a fellow in a zoot suit. Not what one would call traditional satanic garb for sure. I was expecting to hear of people coming to the apartment dressed in ceremonial wizards' cloaks and hooded monks' caves, not zoot suits. As the details of the case got stranger, I began to seriously wonder if dear Aggie might have been sniffing the ammonia for one too many years. She went on to talk about the odd noises and the chanting that followed and what she was now calling the ceremony. This was her description. Once all of the people arrived, sometimes 10 or 20 of them, the smells would get stronger and stronger. I heard a lot of laughing and talking, just like a regular party was going on. Then there'd be men talking loudly and women giggling, and there was music, but not the kind of music that you'd expect young people to be playing, even though I hate that rap and rock and roll stuff. It was classical kind of stuff, like Beethoven and Mozart, but not regular tunes that you recognize. They were very somber, like gloomy music with heavy beats like funeral marches. The music would start around 9 o'clock and then continue all night. Sometimes the classical music changed into organ music, like what you might hear in a church or in a theater that had the Phantom of the Opera in it. It would happen like this once a month usually, but never on the same days. Sometimes it was on a weekday and sometimes it was on the weekend, but that was the normal stuff. It was around midnight when things got spooky. I stayed up late the second time I heard the weird get-together going on, and I was just about to go to bed when I heard the gong. Just like a Chinese gong, it sounded 3 times, and things got real quiet in 7S. Then, in about a few minutes, I heard a man talking, reciting like he was reciting passages from the Bible or something. Then I heard the gong again, and it was struck another 3 times. Now, when the man recited, I heard the whole group say the same things he was saying. Real strange words like blank, and words I didn't understand like flesh and darkness, and even the word hell. I didn't much understand what they were doing that first time I heard the crazies going on, but when they let it all at once, it was one loud voice. Hail Satan, I nearly fell out of my bed. I had to admit that Aggie's account of what went on in the apartment was intriguing. And if it had happened on only one occasion, I would have dismissed it as being a prank or some kind of play rehearsal or something with a logical explanation. But Aggie and a number of other tenants in the building had heard what sounded very much to me like a ritual of some sort. That fact, coupled with the odd incense burning, began to rouse my curiosity, and I felt there might be actually something to the 7S phenomenon. I thought that this was enough to warrant an investigation, and I was satisfied that I had enough to go on to start building data for the X Investigations case files, but little did I know that this was just the beginning. What Aggie had described next definitely fit into the realm of the paranormal. I was with Aggie for at least 6 hours discussing the odd goings-on in her building. She was very forthcoming, describing what she had heard, what the neighbors were saying, and the strange odors that emanated from the apartment. She even explained how the couple, who I later learned were Caroline and Arthur Hastings, originally from London, had recently gotten a new pet dog after their old dog expired suddenly. The old dog, a large black Rottweiler, was seldom seen outside of the apartment, and many of the curious tenants wondered when the animal was ever walked to relieve itself. We just kind of assumed that the dog was walked late at night when everyone was asleep, Aggie said. The new dog, a large black Chow, on the contrary, was seen quite often, usually just before midnight. I was amazed that so many people in the building had the time or the inclination to pay attention to their odd neighbors' habits in such detail. They had become a tenement building spy network that regularly reported their findings to each other over afternoon tea and cookies. This made me believe that some bored tenants needed a little spice in their lives, and what I was hearing was grossly exaggerated. But the vivid descriptions that were told by Sadie, Aggie's friend, and her subsequent curse kept me on the case. Sadie and I met in Aggie's apartment on a Thursday afternoon. The plumbing in the place, if not the original pipes, had to be at least 50 years old. The sink was a large green basin with the main pipe exposed underneath. The hot and cold water pipes leading up to the faucets could be seen running along the wall and into the ceiling. I was startled when Aggie turned on the water and the air pressure caused a large, loud, rhythmic banging before the water spouted out. I said to Aggie that she should worry about her plumbing being possessed by demons and not one of her apartments. She chuckled politely, but immediately turned the conversation over to Sadie, which was a little disturbing to me because Aggie was always one to follow up on a good jibe and would give it right back to me. She asked Sadie, another middle-aged woman who had lived in the building for years, to tell me what had happened to her. Sadie said she thought I would think she was nuts, but I assured her that I heard many unusual stories, and the last thing I would think at this point was that she was crazy, considering at least all the trouble Aggie had gone through to get me involved. Sadie lived on the 8th floor of the building, and one evening she was going downstairs to throw away her trash, and as she did so, she passed 7S. It just so happened that some black-clad young people were entering the apartment at the same time. Sadie told me she was staring at the group because all of the mysterious stuff surrounding the apartment that occurred when suddenly one bald-headed young man with a prominent tattoo that looked like a serpent's tail jutting out from under the collar of his shirt and up to his neck looked Sadie straight in the eye. He dropped his gaze to the Star of David that she wore around her neck and said, "What are you staring at, old woman? Do we frighten you? We think we're freaks who worship Satan or something. Well, that trinket around your neck's not going to protect you. In fact, I spit on your impotent God and I curse your stupid religion and you." Needless to say, Sadie was shaken up by the encounter and hurried away to complete her errand. It took her nearly 15 minutes to calm down and regain her composure, and she told me she was in no hurry to pass the apartment again until every one of those guests was out of sight. Once back in her own apartment, Sadie felt safe and went to bed around 11 p.m., but that surly man's words kept ringing in her head, especially the part about her being cursed. I never believed in curses, but I admit that what he said bothered me and made me toss and turn that night. It was the way that bald man said it to me, so full of hate, and that tattoo on his neck frightened me. I will tell you that I did have a strange dream that made me feel as though I was choking, and I awoke around 3 a.m., startled and thinking about that earlier incident. And that's when the weird things began. Sadie got up to go to the bathroom and noticed a large black spot in the corner of her bathroom floor. It was difficult for her to see what caused the spot with only her nightlight illuminating the path to the bathroom. As Sadie got closer, she bent down and removed her glasses to get a better look. That black spot was not simply a large mark on the floor, but rather it was glistening. At least that's what Sadie thought at first. As she leaned closer, she realized that the spot was not a spot at all, but a large pool of black insects, water bugs, that were huddled together, undulating in the corner and attempting to climb their way up the corner of the bathroom wall. She screamed and then slammed that bathroom door shut. She said she could actually hear the bugs clicking on the tiles in a disgusting frenzy. Sadie ran back into her bedroom and then jumped under the bed covers for safety. She was hoping that she was just dreaming and there were no bugs crawling around the floor, but those clicking noises became louder and louder, almost deafening. She told me that just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the noises stopped. She waited for about 10 minutes until she had the courage to return to the bathroom to see if the water bugs were still there. She was about to get out of bed, but realized that every time she removed the covers from her body, she found herself covered again. I would pull down the blanket and try to get out of bed, but those covers were on me again. I did this many, many times, and I was very frightened. It was like I was experiencing the same scene over and over again, and I couldn't escape, Sadie said. Once Sadie realized she wasn't dreaming, she panicked, screaming and flailing her arms so violently, she finally escaped from the bed covers. Despite the early hours, she immediately called Aggie, sobbing on the phone as she tried to explain what was happening in her apartment. Then that's it. Let's go ahead and let's pause it here for part 1 of chapter 5 of the Occult Investigator, Real Cases from the Files of Ex-Investigations by Bob Johnson, the chapter being called The Satanist Next Door. Let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. What do you guys think, right? Interesting topic. As I'm mentioning at the beginning of the video, there's all these conceptions about Satanism and then also those who practice it involving Satanists. And it's one thing to hear about it, it's another when in this case it's happening right there, right where you live, especially if you're at an apartment complex and let's say it's right next door to you. Lots of interesting things that are coming out with regards to this as well. Lots of things that, as the author noted, kind of go against what the usual conception is. The idea of like black hoods and weird clothing. Now in this case they were a little unique, but they were wearing stuff from older times, like in this case the 40s and the 50s. And on top of that there were those gongs and then the almost Beethoven somber-like music. What was up with that, right? I guess we'll find out more here in just a little bit. And then finally there was that confrontation involving the situation with the neighbor, Sadie, and then her having whatever it was with that young man cursing her, and then she was just experiencing this situation with what was occurring as far as her in that bedroom and then in that bathroom too. Interesting stuff. By the way, you may have noticed that I said blank on some words. I'm going to do this on this chapter and then others going forward. There are some words being read here that are tied to real names, like real names of these demigods, if you could call them that. And those are the words that I think, in my case, like I don't want to say them out loud either, let alone try to think about them too much. They're words of names, in other words, of real beings, real creatures that I think can cause real harm if you think about them too much. So for the sake at least of this video and then myself and then others listening to this, I'm not going to say them. You can always find them in the chapter if you want. But again, extreme caution when it comes to that part. All right, let's go ahead and let's end it here. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and comments on there are. I'd like to hear part 2. In this case, I'm going to do it soon. I want to hear what happens afterward with these neighbors there. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.